Hello again, everyone. This is another installment of MustardHub Voices Behind the Build. In these episodes, I sit down with the people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes, and my guest today is Kelli Send. Kelli is the co-founder and SVP of Financial Planning Services at Francis, where she leads the firm's financial wellness team. And with more than 35 years of experience advising plan participants, Kelli oversees curriculum design and delivery, as well as Francis's money coaching services. Under her leadership, the financial wellness team has earned more than 20 Eddie Awards for excellence in plan participant education. Francis was founded on the principle that American worker deserves holistic investment and money advice without jargon, judgment, or a hidden sales agenda. Kelli and her team work alongside clients, not above them, to help workers achieve what she calls work-life money balance. And outside of work, Kelli is a self-described master juggler of career, kids, and household. Her happy place is on top of a mountain with boards on her feet, with Disney World as a close second. Welcome to Behind the Build. Thanks for joining me, Kelli.
Thank you, Curtis. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm excited to share the wild world of financial planning in the workplace.
We'll dig into all things financial wellness in a second, but I have to know first. I know you're an avid, I guess, snowboarder. On off the top of your head, tell me a great ski mountain that won't destroy your paycheck.
Oh, a great ski mountain that will not destroy your paycheck. I would have to argue, believe it or not, if you're going to go smaller, do in the Midwest. The best ski place. It's not a mountain. It's a little baby mountain. It's a place called Crystal Mountain in Michigan. It's one of my favorites. We're from that area originally, and you can get in and out of there with very little cash. Most of the expenses, and I ski. I don't snowboard.
Okay, got it.
Ski only. We took lessons quite some time ago at Snowmass, and at the end of the day, my husband said, "I'm never skiing again," and I said, "I'm never snowboarding again." So.
A match made in heaven, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That is good to know. I will have to keep that sort of in my hip pocket next time I'm planning a family vacay. But I want to start with you. You've spent more than 3 decades advising, plan participants. That's not, a field I think people sort of stumble into casually. So what originally pulled you into financial wellness?
Well, I got my start as a broker at a large brokerage firm, and quickly learned that it was more about selling people things than it was really helping people. I was attracted initially to the concept of teaching. And so I prospected companies to be, this would have been, in the late 80s, to do lunch and learns about money topics in the hopes that then I would turn them into a retail wealth management client. And I quickly learned that organizations became, this was just at the beginning of the 401k world, that organizations really were really interested in understanding how to start a 401k plan. So I received this prospect and went to who is still to this day my business partner, Mike Francis, my co-founder, who had already developed a couple 401k plans that he was advising. And what drew me to it is really helping people, and less about getting the rich richer, but really helping everyone. And that is really the impetus of what started Francis to begin with. And we grew it to the largest 401k team at that large brokerage. And back in 2004, went independent because you really can't say you're independent unless you really get independent. And so we took the company out from underneath the large brokerage. This would have been in 2004, and have been growing ever since with that same mantra. We're going to help everybody. Everybody deserves, a sound money plan and help from professionals, not just the wealthy.
I love that. And I'm curious, like, as you spent the years inside that world before you founded Francis. What was it specifically? You talked about a lot of things, right? Really helping people as opposed to helping the rich get richer. But I'm curious, like, what are the things that bothered you about the way that the financial advice was like being delivered to the everyday workers, right? Was there a moment, was there a conversation with a participant or something that made that, right, that sort of started that shift in your mind?
Well, it really is just a massive, misconnect, because back in that era, this was when pensions were starting to go away and participants were given these crazy things called a 401k plan and given this list of investment choices with very little ability to know what they're doing and help, or to understand what they were doing. And so it really was a giant, disconnect between making this entire population of these employees make these decisions and having really nowhere to turn, is really created sort of that thing that we really need to help everyone. And certainly the employer wants to help as well to the extent that they can financially, right, with offering benefits like this. Because even today, 30 years later, the average worker is still struggles with understanding basic, financial planning topics. The disconnect there is this: a broker will help them, but only if they already have money. So how do you help the worker that's got most of their money in their corporate retirement plan, their 401k plan, their 403b? They don't have money to invest otherwise elsewhere in IRAs and this and that. So they make a really terrible prospect for the wealth manager. And the way that we've structured our business is, we are a flat fee. We are paid just for our time. And so what happens in the wealth management industry is they want, because they get typically paid assets under management, so a 1% fee or whatever, that they have to, from just the standpoint of how they get paid, they really focus just on those C-suite individuals.
Yeah.
Our focus doesn't have to be that way. It can be much broader because we're paid differently.
I want to hear about the founding story, right? I mean, all of this, the observations that you had eventually became Francis, and when you named your business partner, it sort of clicked how it got the name. I'm guessing, but you could probably share that with everybody. Tell me about the gap that you guys saw that nobody else was filling, right? There's obviously educate, right? You talk about the workers, right, didn't really understand or know what they were doing, and so it's sort of clear to me, right? Obviously, being somewhat familiar with the history, but perhaps you can kind of tell us a little bit about that story.
Sure. We had a large company that we still have today that came to us and said, we're hearing lots of stories about kind of pay for play arrangements within the mutual fund industry where brokers will get, compensated, or mutual fund companies will compensate the broker for shelf space so that their brokers will,
Push their products.
advertise and promote their products. So this large company said to us, look, you need to sign off as a co-fiduciary. There's fiduciary status and there's ERISA fiduciary status, two different terms, right? People use them interchangeably, frankly, incorrectly. But we went to the top of the organization of this large brokerage firm and said, look, this company's asking us to sign off as an ERISA fiduciary. And the answer was, get out of here. I don't know if it was partly because, we were this Midwest based, pretty young, specialty team for the firm or whatever. But I do think ultimately it's the you cannot be selling mutual funds and make a living selling mutual funds and claim you're independent. And so it was that sort of aha moment. Furthermore, my business partner graduated from law school, went to law school at night, and really it started to change our perspective about what does it really mean to be a fiduciary. And so that's really was sort of that we've got to leave the large brokerage firm or stop saying that we're independent. It was really a would you rather, right? And so that's what spurred this effort to depart.
So, for listeners that are sort of hearing about Francis for the first time, maybe you can walk us through what you do, who are your clients. You don't have to name any names, but you can kind of give us a
Right.
picture of who your clients are and what does engagement actually look like.
Yeah, great. So Francis is an investment consultant in the retirement plan world. So you're an employer. You offer a 401k plan. There are some legal responsibilities that you must perform. Make sure that you've got good plan design. Make sure that you've got good investment choices for your folks. That all is what we do on our investment consulting side. And we have, 14 billion under advisement at this point, doing just that. So we help regional national employers help them design and build their retirement plans. That is a completely separate customer than my customer. My customer are the employees or the people that have money in the plan. Years ago, there was a thing, a body of law that passed, the 404C, they call it, basically, is the employer, one of their fiduciary responsibilities is to provide adequate information and education. Well, what does that mean, right? So how do you do that?
They
So
call you.
many, yeah, exactly. I mean, how do you know if they're engaged, right? So we started the practice really focusing more on the 401k, right? Where we would hold classes at these locations at different corporations, whether they be a law firm or a firm selling widgets, right? Factory folks. Right now we have 3 bilingual Spanish speakers where we do just a ton of work in Spanish speaking communities. And so it's started there. What we quickly learned is that a person's money life isn't just about the 401k. And there has been engagement issues with 401ks forever since they've started. And the industry has largely responded by automating things, which is a fantastic thing. Automatic enrollment, right? When you get hired, you're automatically enrolled. Your savings are automatically increased. And then there's auto mutual funds, target date mutual funds. So the industry has really done a great job automating the 401k decision. But you quickly learn meeting with individuals, which is what we do all day long, every day, that their money life isn't just about the 401k.
Yeah.
And their preparedness for retirement very much depends on all the other things.
Right.
Savings, debt, other IRAs, spousal accounts, saving for college. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So over the years, we expanded to include a broad-based financial planning benefit. Even tax planning today is within our purview. And so it really started with very much of a, and the industry talks about 401k one-on-ones, which means that your record keeper, one of the big mutual fund companies, sends a rep. They meet with the people, they get online, they pick savings percentage, they decide the tax treatment, they pick their funds, and out they go. And then 20 minutes later, somebody else comes in. And it's literally that. And that's kind of what we started with. We are now much more holistic financial planning services because it isn't just about the 401k, and the ability to effectively prepare for retirement is very much dependent upon the ability to manage money today, budgets, debt, things like that. And so we broadened it. The broadening of what we do was just a natural outcome of how you start to work with families and you get to know them. You realize that it's so interchangeable.
Yeah.
It isn't just 401k and done. It just is not.
Well, you use this phrase, work-life money
Mm-hmm.
balance, which I mean is a deliberate addition, right, to the usual work-life balance language, which
Yeah.
I really liked that. I mean, so why does money belong in that equation, right? What changes when employers start treating it that way?
Well, why do people work?
To
Mostly
live,
to get
right?
money,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And so those two things, work-life balance. I can't even say work-life anymore. I've been so used to saying work-life money. Um,
yeah.
Money is, or the lack of it is core, right? And that's the reason why we get up in the morning and work. And so we find, and in fact, so much of the thing that we advertise on our website is, how do we find work-life money balance? That's why we have things like, ski stories on our website. But frankly, it's all intermixed, and you pay your worker from, if you're a person trying to decide, okay, do we do this kind of employee benefit? We have a group of employees that they put in a good day's work, but whether or not they're going to be productive and effective is going to be based on everything else in their lives, which is foundational to money. And so that's how we started with this work-life money balance. Is money is integral in both work and life, and so it needs to be included in the equation.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about this industry problem that you were pretty direct about, right? You said that wealth managers, how did you say it? Or they often deliver this conflicted advice, right? And that most workers are left with nowhere to really go. So I want you to unpack this for me. Like, what does conflicted advice look like in practice first?
Happy to do so. Conflicts arise when you, the firm, or the representative of the firm, personally benefit by a decision that a participant makes. Even large 401k record keepers, not going to name names, but large firms that do 401k record keeping. So when you go to your statement, that's the name on the statement, right? That's the website you go to when you check your account. Virtually all of them are conflicted as well, meaning that what they really want is for you to, when you leave that job, roll your money over into one of their IRAs where they get paid way more than if they were just left in the retirement plan at work. And so the question becomes kind of who owns the data, right? So record keepers will go out and pitch these departed people by literally placing outbound phone calls to try to get them to roll money into one of their IRAs, which frankly is in most cases higher cost. Now, our model is if somebody wants to do that because they want to go out and buy Apple stock and not the 12 choices that are available into the workplace plan, we'll help them find somebody and do it, right? So it's, but there is this sense that they're all there to help when they make money based on the decision, yes, I'm going to open up that IRA when I leave my employer, or no, I'm going to stay in the corporate retirement plan. So that's one type of conflict, is the actual record keeper for the plan that the employer is hired, right?
That record keeper winds up essentially creating a very clever customer pipeline for themselves. That's really all that winds up being, right?
And it's brilliant, right? And large mutual fund companies have largely been successful and are getting even more successful and even larger because this constant pipeline. Yeah. Now, the second conflict comes in with the investment consulting work. So you're now an investment consultant sitting on the same side of the table as the employer, and you're helping them with their retirement plan. Many of our competitors have a side car, if you will, the wealth management side, same firm, and they can direct the conversation in such a way that the folks will roll money into them as well. Guess what? That's also conflicted. And so the way that Francis was founded is to completely eliminate all of that. We're simply paid for our time, just like an attorney or an accountant would be paid, because we believe that's the right thing for the participant. And you can make, I'm sure there's probably 401k consultants that do what we do that have the side, wealth management side, that think we're crazy. But any time you do that, it results in uneven delivery, because they're not going to spend time on the person that has $10,000 in their plan. They want to spend time with the person that has $1 million in their plan. And that's the problem.
And I would say it doesn't, it extends, even this particular problem extends far beyond 401ks, right? In any kind of wealth management, you walk into a Chase Bank and all of their, wealth advisors are going to be selling Chase products.
Mhm.
Am I sort of directionally right on that?
You are. Sometimes they'll offer certain mutual fund families that do provide them commission, so it won't be necessarily that particular brand name, but it's
Right.
just that, and you don't make a lot of money as a wealth manager helping people build an emergency fund
Yeah,
or
that's
helping
fair stuff.
people with Social Security or Medicare or some of these other issues that we run into every single day. So it's a much more even delivery. It's equitable rather
Yeah.
than only shooting for the people that already have the money. Um, and it makes better workplaces because people stick around. I will tell you one just precious story. This was not me that actually had this happen to. It was a colleague of mine. We had the unfortunate situation where a client of ours had to get rid of a particular location. So
Hmm.
everyone received layoff notices. We were brought there to help them understand what they could do with their 401k plan. And at the end of the meeting, a woman walked up to one of my colleagues and said, is there any other companies in this city that you work with? Because if there are, that's where I'm going to apply for my next job.
Oh,
Isn't that crazy?
I like
Because
that.
yeah, she knew how valuable this was for help, and that if they had Francis, then that means that those folks care about their employees.
So, how would the average worker even know whether the person in front of them has their best interests at heart? And that's one question. And the second is, I guess, if they didn't, I mean, what's the real cost of that conflicted advice? For the worker, for their family, for the employer who thinks
Mhm.
they're offering a benefit.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the word fiduciary is thrown out like crazy
Yeah.
to advertise that is someone that has your best interests in mind. And there's even been several regulations that have been implemented and then turned off, and so it's been an issue in the industry for years. Um, they really, someone that says that they are a fiduciary, they are only a fiduciary after you say yes to buying their investment products, right? And so then once you say yes and you become a customer, then they're going to charge you a percentage of assets. So the word fiduciary oftentimes is code for you're going to get charged a percent of assets. Now, is that terrible? No, it is not necessarily. And so you make a great point, Curtis, is, what's the harm, right? And so some of the folks that do what we do in a conflicted way will say, well, at least conflicted advice is better than no advice. And if that's the business model that they want, that more power to them, right? That's just not how we've chosen to run
Yeah.
our firm. And so it's really that issue. How a
Okay.
person knows is they just need to understand how their proposed planner advisor is going to be compensated. And if it's a percentage of assets, then you then compare that to what you're paying in your 401k. And oftentimes you'll find that staying in that 401k is way more cost effective.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you've said that sort of surprised me, right, is that financial stress is kind of a reality for most people, regardless of income, which I think that kind of cuts against this assumption, right, that it's just a low wage problem.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of, yeah, I see you nodding. I'm kind of curious. Like, tell me what you see that makes this true.
It is not a low wage problem. It is absolutely not. It is the lack of comfort level of knowing what to do, and that money is by definition a limited commodity. What is the old saying? This dates me, but there's a lot more places for my money than money for my places. That's it's kind of what regardless, so it isn't something that just plagues those folks that have jobs where they don't earn much. It's stress is an issue because by definition it's a limited commodity. If we got paid any amount we wanted to, we wouldn't be stressed. And plus it's a personal issue. Families don't always want to talk about it. I don't think I did that great of a job, and I'm in this business, right? So it's a matter of where do people turn. Now, some states, Wisconsin, which is where I live, has implemented some of this now, where they've mandated it to be part of the high school curriculum. We're all about
Really?
that because
Oh, I love
people
that.
don't, we know I have young engineers that graduate and they don't know hardly anything, and they're
Yeah.
very highly educated.
Yeah.
Um, there is a lot of talk today about the sort of the initial incomes. People have a hard time making ends with that, with the amount of student loans oftentimes when they come out of college. There has been a great resurgence in our workplace of going into the trades, because generally speaking, those folks that are in those trades and spend a career there are pretty darn well prepared.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
And so money stress is something that we all carry around with us, because by definition, we don't have it and we work for it. But then there's a million different ways that we can spend it. And what we try to do is provide structure. We don't want to be a company that says you can never do anything, or dismissive. Oh, just spend one less day at Starbucks buying a mocha. That's dismissive, right? It's helping
Mhm.
people understand kind of how do I, in small little bits, make positive change. Um,
You talked about financial stress. How does that show up at work? What does that actually look like on a Monday morning in a meeting, in someone's performance, or performance reviews? Tell me.
well, there are several studies that they use the term presenteeism, where
Hmm.
they're present, but they're thinking about other things. And so, how many hours during your day do you find yourself wandering and thinking about other things? Certainly, it can um, manifest itself in more days off, right? You've got to take care of somebody that's out of work or something. There's all of those things as well. So and it helps. To me, the biggest factor is, does this, from an employer perspective, keep people at work, working and productive? Because we have seen that this benefit does lower turnover. And that is a very good thing for employers, because then they don't have to retrain. So providing this benefit, and
Yeah.
oh, by the way, Curtis, it is the number one obstacle that we have as a firm, is because of the way that we are paid. We have to get paid to do what we do. We're not
Yeah.
getting paid based on assets. So some of our plans pay for it, or some of our employers pay for it out of corporate coffers. And that's a tough conversation to have with a tough CFO. That's like, wait a minute, we're going to provide financial planning and we have to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
But that's starting to kind of turn. The tide is turning, where people realize these CFO types and um, CH I'm sorry, chief financial resources officers. I
Yeah.
can't say that. But they have discovered that, frankly, this type of benefit does keep people in their seats working. But then, what it does that's even more amazing is people retire on time. You know what I mean? So you've got people that are just like, we're working with a university now, and the a local university, and the comment was, we want to hire Francis to help our teams achieve retire, but then go ahead and get retired
Do it.
so
Yeah.
that the newer, younger ones can come in. So it's helping that worker stay where you want them as an employer, and then when they're done, then they ride off into the sunset with their money and have a great life,
Do you
allowing
think?
lower paid individuals to go into those spots.
Yeah. Do you think that leaders are connecting the dots between the financial stress and, like, what you're talking about, the engagement, the retention, the productivity issues that sometimes they're trying to solve elsewhere?
They're starting to. It's been a slow start, but I think there is a recognition. One of the challenges is, if you're an HR executive, is what does a financial wellness program look like? Because in order to really make a successful program, we would argue you need to have people engaged. So offering workshops from your record keeper, most of these large record keepers today, they have, oh gosh, an article, they'll be, come and listen to a class on budgeting. And so there's all this really great classes that they can attend. But in general, the worker's just not engaged enough. We have found that having a personal relationship with a planner it really moves the needle much more effectively than just group type education, because you still have to get people to come to these. And certain industries, healthcare, for example, oh my gosh, totally, to get people to come to meetings, forget it. So it varies based on the industry as well, but I think, yes, HR folks, CFO types are starting to recognize that a financially healthy worker, or one that has access to someone to help them, is a better worker. It's just paying for it, right? Now, the other half of our plans will actually debit this. It can be a completely free benefit, free to the employer, because it comes out of the 401k plan. This is a approved expense for the 401k plan. So some of our plans do that as well.
I want to talk a little bit about some of those folks in small and medium-sized businesses, right? Because I think there's this assumption that like financial wellness is a big company benefit. Something like Fortune 500s offer, maybe not like a 40-person company, can pull off, or something like that. What do you say to that?
I would actually suggest that mid-sized to smaller-sized employers are actually going to be easier to implement. On average, if we've got 20% of the population meeting with a Francis planner every year, 20% of 40,000 people is a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So in fact, smaller employers, where it's not such a big giant budget item, I think is actually more effective.
What can they do better than the large enterprises when it comes to supporting their people financially? Like, it sounds like you're talking about some structural advantages, maybe.
Well, yes, often smaller employers tend to be not national in scope, right? So they're more, kind of centrally located in one location. And so it's much easier to have a Francis financial planner come in and spend 2 or 3 days there and meet with people. I will tell you that COVID has been a really good thing for this practice, because we now are using this technology all the time. We actually, pre-COVID, we were 80% on site and 20% virtual. Post-COVID, it's about 60 on site, 40 virtual. Part of it is aging, right? As the workforce ages out, the people that are not so comfortable with technology are retiring. But it's that mid-size employer that can really dig in deep and really help their folks, because they're dealing with everybody in maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 locations. Where it becomes more challenging, and therefore all virtual, is in a national employer. We work with several of firms that are really truly national, and that challenge ends up being communication, right? Is how do you in the HR world, in the benefits world, make sure that your employees that might be in Anchorage or Miami, right? How do you get the word out, about what you do? And so I think it's easier when it's smaller, mid-sized employers, because they just have communication methods, all staff, messages from the president kind of things that allow them to kind of get the word out. Much
Are there
easier.
fewer regulatory obstacles as well, or is that not a main or even an issue worth considering?
Not really. I mean, the 401k world is, regardless of size, the employer must do these things. These are their fiduciary duties, their risks of fiduciaries. So regardless of size, I think when you get really small, we're talking, under 50 employees, maybe, it becomes difficult to scale because there's just, if you've got, 50 employees and typically your budget's going to be pretty small, you may not be able to afford, this type of financial planning benefit. If you're going to pay for it out of corporate dollars.
Most you mentioned, I guess, that most employers, larger employers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've said the industry has done a decent job there because most employers will offer something, right? Like they will sponsor a retirement plan, or maybe you talked about auto enrolling, auto escalating. Um, but you also said that the workers are left sort of on their own for almost every other money issue.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about some of the gaps, right, that the 401k participation alone doesn't solve.
First and foremost would be, what employee benefits do I consume? Do I do the life insurance? Do I do the supplemental life insurance? Do I do the high deductible health plan with the HSA, or don't I? Where should I bank? Should I do a high yield savings account, or should I do a regular bank? And should I pay my car off, or my student loans off, or my credit card off first?
You have
All that.
identified quite a few.
Yeah, it's just like all that.
If you were going to redesign an employer-sponsored financial support, like from scratch, what would it include if you're designing this?
Well, the industry is on to some of it, because some of the programs that I love are emergency funds that are as part of the employer plan. Recent laws, Secure 2.0 is the name of the legislation that built some of that. Still has some long way to go on that. But truly, this is going to sound self-serving. I get it, but it's really basically having this a financial planning benefit that can help with all of those things. Sponsored by the employer. I mean, the employer now offers. I mean, who would have thought? How many years ago? 80 years ago, or whatever. We didn't even have health insurance. Employers weren't involved in that, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel sometimes bad for poor HR folks, because everything is their responsibility, right? They've got so much on their plate.
Yeah.
But employees look to them. So to me, it's offering an employer solution that is either certainly sponsored by the employer. It doesn't have to be paid by the employer. It just comes out of the 401k, as part of the 401k fees. And so that's kind of how I would build it if we could start over.
Well, you mentioned that some things are trending in the right direction. So let's do some forward looking here. How do you see maybe the workforce's expectations around financial wellness shifting over the next few years, right? So not necessarily the actual things, but people's perception of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Is that changing?
I think they're relying on their employer more and more, and that trend started way back when, and so it's the employer's involvement. So, the chief executive that has the attitude, and some do, look, I pay my people to do this job for me. I don't care what they do with their money when they leave the building, right? So it's incorporating that recognition that it's on the employer, and the employer can, through very low cost, because now you're leveraging everybody together, offer these types of services. One case in point is there's a firm that actually, some of our clients use this, where they will, you will sign up for 1 year of legal help. So people will sign up for that for the year. They'll get their wills done. They'll get all that thing set up, and then they just turn it off. So having some of those types of programs, I think is going to be increasingly important and asked for, by the workforce. Secondly, I think there is a huge trend towards, I guess the industry would call it, hyper customization. So I'm in my 401k plan, and I am, I'm taking maternity leave. Well, wouldn't it be cool if your 401k provider could send you information about that? You know what I mean? So really being able to customize the communication down to the level of what's happening in somebody's life. They're going to, we're going to engage that. Examples, we do bi-weekly classes. on various topics. And we learned several years ago, we get real narrow with those. Managing money in the case of marriage or divorce, building confidence for global families. We get real narrow with them to talk about, well, you need to save in your 401k plan. It's too generic. So
Yeah.
getting much more customized. I think this tool right here, right, has to be first and foremost. So it's apps, it's using an AI tool to answer benefit questions. These are all things that we're doing that I just think it becomes a lot more, there's going to be more demand rather than less demand going forward.
I think it's interesting that you said that you feel that folks are relying more on their employer for those things, which I don't disagree, actually. I think that that's also very much the case. What I find so interesting is at the very same time that that's taking place, more of the workforce is actually moving towards fractional contract, even part-time employment, right? So these two trends are happening simultaneously, which on the surface, right, wouldn't you wouldn't think they don't go together, right? If the workforce is trending in this direction, right, that seems to be more misaligned, right, from like the employer employee relationship, right, more part-time, more fractional, more contract, and yet at the same time the workers that are W-2 are now relying more on their employer for these types of things. It's just a really interesting. I mean,
No, I
I don't know how
recognize.
that I have more commentary other than it's really kind of fascinating how those two trends are happening simultaneously.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be interesting? An interesting study would be, of course, it'd take you a long time. 20 years from now, if you were a contract worker, what is your financial condition? And if you were a regular W-2 employee, what was your financial condition? Because I agree with you, there is a lot more, but with freedom, being a contract worker, I think comes at a cost, because we generally see employees that have maybe one is a participant of ours and their spouse is a contract worker or something like that. They tend to not save as much for retirement. But it'd be a very interesting, long-term study to do, no doubt, because I suspect, I think they'd be worse off, but I can't prove it.
I think that it reinforces this need, I think, and it stresses the need for reforms when it comes to these concepts of portability,
Hmm.
of benefits portability, right? And obviously that's probably a whole other that's a whole other podcast episode on its own. But it's really the one thing that to me can actually tie those two things together.
Hmm. I
Not necessarily
completely
a simple
agree.
thing, but
Yeah.
could be very much forward thinking. Do you feel like there's generational differences, that play here, like what younger workers ask versus what older workers need? That
Yes.
generational difference, I think, when it comes to benefits and things like that, I think can sometimes be, a really critical problem for some organizations if they don't
Yeah,
personalize.
it's generational. It's also geographical. Now,
Right.
people are oftentimes surprised that there are parts of the state that I live in that don't have reliable high-speed internet in their communities. Mind blowing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's so rural, that they don't have it. But it absolutely is generational. I think the younger generation wants everything solved within this device right here, right? If they can't get it on here, they don't do it.
Yep.
And they want an instant answer, using AI solutions to answer. Um, there is still, what do they say? Is there now 4 or 5 generations in the workplace today? Because there are still, the what do they call it? The silent generation or the greatest generation. The pre-baby boomers. There's still some of those folks in the workplace,
Oh
and they
yeah.
don't do things like computers. And I think one of the, what case in point, there are people today that have no idea they even have a plan balance. There was one of these northern Wisconsin participants that came in to see one of my colleagues, and was downtrodden, and he said some four-letter words about how he needs to get his what together, and he's really ready. He's gonna save. He's gonna do it, right? So my colleague meets with them. Come to find out, he had over $70,000 in his 401k, and he had no knowledge.
Wow.
Now, how do you not have knowledge? Well, you don't send pay stubs anymore. So he had no idea he was saving. His employer automatically enrolled him, automatically increased his savings, put him in a target date fund. Record keepers don't send statements anymore. So that'll be fine once all of those individuals that are really not technology engaged go ahead and retire. But right now it's kind of a problem, and when he showed him that he still had 75 grand in there and he had no idea, he was just like, wow. And frankly, case in point,
amazing.
There is a huge trend today, or huge, and not in a good way, with abandoned 401ks, because people leave their employer and they don't get statements, so they don't know. Secure 2.0 passed a law that said, or was it 1.0? It might have been, anyway, one of the Secure Acts, that now paper statements are actually required once a year. And that seems so old school to the young person, but it is critical. And so it's really having the industry understand that not everybody has this in the palm of their hands, and therefore they need to make sure that they're communicating and engaging with clients. And so absolutely, I see that while technology and instant quick bits of education that's just catered just to you personally is the future, the recognition is there's still workers out there that just don't do it and need traditional forms of communication. So that's why when somebody says what engagement technique works best, it's like all of it.
Yep. I'd love to just to wrap us up here. I have a question for you. Something I always really like to ask. If a business leader came up to you, and I'm sure this probably happens quite a bit. As a matter of fact, they want to know how to genuinely support their people's financial well-being, but don't necessarily know where to start and don't have a Fortune 500's budget. What's that single most important piece of advice that you give them? If you only had a minute, you're on an elevator up to the top floor before the doors open, what is that one thing you tell them?
They need to listen to their people. They should get them together in a focus group and interview them and say, what do you need? Let's hear from your folks.
I like that idea. Get a focus group together. Kelli, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you, Curtis. We really thank you for the opportunity.
We covered a lot of good ground. Thanks to all you watching and listening to MustardHub Voices Behind the Build. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Please visit mustardhub.com to learn more about MustardHub and discover how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. Until next time, thank you.